You want to speak clearly, be understood the first time, and move on, right? Without scanning the room or adjusting your tone mid-sentence just to keep the peace. But even when you're sure of what you want to say, you still pause. You still translate it, still make it sound more agreeable, just in case. And then you're holding back because you're reading the room, calculating how your clarity might land, trying to be truthful and agreeable at the same time. And that constant rewiring of your words, it's not strategy. It's exhaustion disguised as emotional intelligence. Because every time you adjust how you speak, not to connect, but to manage perception, you chip away at the internal bandwidth you need to stay present, powerful, and fully expressed. And it doesn't just drain your energy, it distorts your message. So today I'm going to show you a simple way to reset the loop that keeps you overperforming for acceptance so that you can stop managing how others might receive you and start speaking from grounded, clear self-leadership. But before we start, I want to introduce myself. Hello, I'm 𝗪𝗲 self-care strategist, founder of Her Extraordinary Life by Design, and creator of the Yes Reset Method, my three-step system I use to help high-achieving women like you set up a life you don't need a vacation from so that you can grow a business you love with less guilt and more freedom. Now, if you're constantly gauging the tone of the room, editing mid-sentence, softening your words, or adding disclaimers just to keep the peace, and you just want to speak clearly without over calculating how it might land or managing someone else's emotional response, stay with me because in just a little bit, I'm going to walk you through a real-time shift that you can use to interrupt the urge to overcorrect yourself in conversations so you can stop draining energy trying to be palatable and start saying what you actually mean with a kind of calm certainty that doesn't need to be explained. But before we get to that, let's talk about the real reason you keep rewording yourself even when you're clear. Because you want to say it clearly, right? And the truth is, you already know exactly what you want to say. But right before the words leave your mouth, you shift. It's subtle, but it's automatic. You soften the edge, you pad the truth, and you rephrase because you're already calculating how it might land. You're calibrating for tone, for safety, for likability. And most of the time, no one even notices because it still comes out sounding thoughtful, polished, and respectful. But you feel the difference because what came out wasn't your full truth. It was the edited for approval version of your truth. You believe the habit is about being mindful, careful, empathetic. But what's actually happening is that you're managing perception in real time and shaping your words to feel digestible instead of disruptive. You've gotten so good at sounding reasonable, you've actually stopped noticing how much of your voice you're leaving out. Maybe it's not about avoiding conflict as much as it's about avoiding what might happen if someone hears your full truth and pulls away or doubts your words or even judges you for it. Because somewhere deep down, there's this belief that being direct means being too much, too bold, too harsh, or maybe even too clear. So you trade full expression for likability. And then you walk away replaying the conversation in your head over and over and over again. Not because you said something wrong, but because you didn't say what you really meant. This is a pattern that quietly drains your self-trust, and it's not a communication issue. It's your nervous system stuck in stay safe mode, telling you that full expression is only safe if it's softened first. And if you've been doing this long enough, you've probably convinced yourself this is just what thoughtful women do. But what's actually happening is that you're editing your voice based on how you think someone might react and calling it being considerate. So now I want to talk about why this constant tone management is quietly burning you out. And that's the part we rarely name, right? Because from the outside, everything looks good. It looks polished and professional. The meeting went well, the conversation flowed, and you were clear enough. But inside, you're tired from managing how every word you said was perceived, from softening what didn't need to be softened in the first place, and from turning down your volume just enough to still be liked. And here's the thing, you might even feel like you're a little burnt out or at least experiencing a symptom of burnout, but it doesn't look like burnout because you're still productive, you're still high functioning, you're still showing up. But inside, there's this slow emotional unraveling, a quiet depletion that no one else sees because all the real work happened in your head. You weren't just participating in the conversation, you were managing the emotional temperature of the room while trying not to lose your point. You adjusted mid-sentence, you added a cushion, you wrapped your insight in disclaimers just to keep it from sounding too much. And when that happens, even in the smallest interactions, this constant tone management builds. And every time you do it, you leave the conversation a little more drained, not because of what you said, but because of everything you had to hold back because you didn't trust yourself enough to speak your truth. This is what happens when you've been performing emotional safety instead of trusting your voice, editing your words so carefully so that you don't have to wonder if they made someone uncomfortable. And when that becomes your default, when every conversation is one more moment of emotional calculation, you start to believe that being agreeable is safer than being honest, that being well received is more important than being rooted in your truth, which allows you to say what you mean clearly and with confidence, or that being liked matters more than being clear. This is the kind of burnout that creeps in when you're lying awake at night, replaying what you said, wondering if it was too much, if you should have said it differently. And that overthinking doesn't stop just because the conversation did, right? It hijacks your sleep. And the next day you wake up already exhausted because your brain never stopped running laps around a moment that's already over. Now, you might think the fix here is to be more confident, to stop overthinking, and to just say what you mean and stop caring so much about how it lands. But if that worked, it would have by now, right? Because the truth is, this isn't a confidence issue. It's a nervous system pattern. It's the internal loop that tells you full expression isn't safe. That's why the solution isn't to just say it louder or to just blurt it out. It's to rebuild trust in the way you think so that you can say what you truly mean and mean what you truly say with confidence. Because if your internal default is to scan for risk before you speak, then of course your voice will come out sounding filtered. Of course you'll soften your words, you'll walk it back or apologize for being too direct. And then after the fact, you'll find yourself replaying the conversation in your head 5 different ways, just as you're trying to fall asleep, right when your brain decides to stay on and making it even harder to get the rest that you need. So think about it this way. The reason you have a hard time saying what you mean is because you're trying to thread the needle between being honest and being liked. So here's what I want you to understand. Self-trust isn't about sounding bold. It's about believing that what you have to say is worth saying. Because if you don't trust your voice when it's inside your head, you'll never trust what you say after you say it. And that's where my framework of self-acceptance and trust comes into play, which is one of the foundational systems inside my work. And it's made up of 3 key capacities. Internal validation, which is your ability to approve your own thoughts, decisions, and ideas before anyone else weighs in. And it works because what it does is it gives you real-time clarity without needing external confirmation or praise so that you can stop asking, was that okay? Or start asking, was that real? It becomes a fast track back to your voice. And it's built through emotional honesty, which is the skill of being radically truthful with yourself about what you want, what feels aligned, and what doesn't. It works because it interrupts the instinct to perform and pulls you out of how do I sound and puts you back into is this true for me? That single shift ends the overthinking spiral before it even starts. And it's built through self-integrity, which is your ability to match your words, actions, and intentions. It works because it builds a consistent pattern of inner trust. So even when your voice shakes or someone disagrees, you don't spiral because you know you showed up in alignment with what's real for you. Now, each of these skills builds on the other, and together they help you make decisions and speak your truth without the emotional hangover afterward. So let me show you how this actually plays out. Let's say you're on a Zoom call with your mastermind group. You're in a mastermind community with maybe 5 or 6 other women. This is something where you meet maybe weekly or bi-weekly or once a month. You've got something to say that you know would bring real value to the conversation. You've rehearsed it, it's clear, and you're ready to contribute. But the moment it's your turn to speak, your throat tightens. You start talking, but midway through, you downshift your tone. You swap a strong word for a gentler one. You hear yourself say, just an idea, or maybe I'm off, but You see one neutral expression on someone's face and you suddenly start doubting the whole thing. And you leave that call feeling smaller because you didn't say it the way you actually meant it. That's where the self-trust framework comes in because internal validation kicks in before the call. When you ask yourself, do I believe in what I'm about to say, even if no one affirms it? And that gets you clear on your message, right? And being okay. Your message isn't always going to land with everyone, but being okay that it lands well and is truth for you, okay? Emotional honesty shows up mid-conversation when you notice the urge to soften and ask yourself, am I saying what I mean or what I think they'll approve of, right? So that you can stop that idea that, oh, I have to soften what I'm saying so that it lands well. And when someone has a neutral expression, it doesn't mean that they think what you're saying, that there's something wrong with it. And then finally, self-integrity is what you walk away with because that grounded sense of peace says, I showed up real. I don't have to overanalyze it now because that's the cost of filtering, right? When you get into that space where you're always constantly scanning for making sure that it's okay for you to speak the way you truly feel, your truth, the message that you're delivering. And it's not just about your words, but it's about your energy, your peace of mind, your trusting in yourself. And that's how I work with my clients because we rebuild that together. I believe that having a framework like this doesn't just help you have the confidence to speak more clearly, but it gives you tools to stop shrinking and editing and overperforming. The self-acceptance and trust framework is one of the core tools I teach my clients when we work together, and it's supported by the Yes Reset method. And here's why it all connects. When you learn how to stop censoring your words just to be agreeable, and when you can name what's true for you without the 5-hour emotional aftermath, that's when you finally feel free to speak without the second guessing. So if you ever walked away from a conversation feeling like you betrayed your own voice, or if you're tired of looking confident on the outside while quietly unraveling on the inside, this is your invitation to reset the loop because the power of your yes starts with trusting your voice enough to say what you mean. You know, as high performing women, we often think we need tighter time management, better boundaries, a different planner to stop feeling overwhelmed. And in order to be seen as an authority in the room, that we have to speak louder, more boldly, so that we can be seen as the most composed, credible, and in control woman in the room, even if we're falling apart inside. But if you want to stay clear, calm, and confident in your decisions before your energy's gone and to trust your voice, you don't need more discipline. What you need is a better system for how you say yes so that you trust yourself. And that's where the yes reset method comes in. And here's why it works so well. The 3-question yes filter is a fast internal checkpoint you run through before saying yes to get grounded in what truly matters. By asking yourself, is this in alignment with my current focus? Would I be saying yes out of alignment, obligation, guilt, or fear? What am I trading for this yes? Because every time you say yes to something, you're closing the door to something else. Now, this works because it allows you to get clear on what's aligned and what's emotional noise so that you can stop defaulting to pressure-based yes decisions that drain your time and energy. And then the next step is to categorize your decisions through a decision lens that helps you to instantly sort your options into yes, no, or not right now, which works because it lets you stop treating every decision like it's urgent or final. And then finally, you learn to protect your yes energy, which is an energy boundary that helps you catch hesitation, pressure, or self-doubt before it hijacks your clarity. And it works because it helps you to spot signs of misalignment before your nervous system goes into overdrive. And this is why my clients work with me because we don't just talk about alignment, we actually build it together. We create the decision filters, the energy boundaries, and the high performance yes systems that help you lead with clarity and peace of mind. And we do it together so that you walk away not just with insight, but with a framework that really makes every yes more powerful, and you learn to trust your yeses. You learn to stop filtering yourself to be more agreeable, and you no longer walk away from conversations questioning everything you said for hours afterwards. So if you want to know what that could possibly look like for you, then comment below or message me directly and we can talk about what's quietly draining your energy and what it could look like to protect your time and your energy in real time so that your voice finally feels like home again and you can trust your voice to say what you mean and mean what you say. Now, before we go, I want you to remember it doesn't always look like burnout, okay? Because a lot of the time it can look like high functioning performance on the outside, while on the inside you're exhausted. You're exhausted from managing how every word you say lands. And you replay what you said over and over again, scanning for signs that you were too much and wondering if you should have said less. And the fallout of the emotional cost can show up as you lying awake at night, questioning if your voice made things worse, and your brain's in a loop, making it hard for you to fall asleep. That's the kind of burnout that's quiet and can go unnoticed for a long time because you're naming it as a one-off symptom of being tired the next day because you didn't sleep well the night before. When in reality, if this pattern of questioning your own voice that has your nervous system in overdrive could be contributing to your sleepless nights. And understand this, from the outside looking in, you're calm, composed, accomplished. But on the outside, you're tired of walking out of conversations, second guessing yourself again. Listen, it's not about needing a better script. It's about feeling safe enough to trust yourself when you speak. And that kind of self-trust doesn't come from pushing harder or performing smarter or ignoring the signs and naming them as one-offs. It comes from resetting the systems that trained you to shrink and ignore that you already know what to say, that what you have to say makes sense, and that you're speaking from alignment. Think of it this way. The longer you keep silencing yourself in small ways, the louder the overthinking gets. And eventually, even your clearest thoughts start to feel unsafe to share. So, if this message landed, if you felt yourself nodding quietly, then make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you know someone who's constantly editing themselves to stay agreeable, composed, or just easy to work with, send this to them because the voice they've been questioning, maybe that you've been questioning, might be the one that they and you need to hear the most. Take good care of you this week, and I'll see you next time.